Hi, this short video is going to take you step by step through what I look for when I'm evaluating your paragraphs, especially for using research and sources within the paragraphs. So what you see here is a sample paragraph that was taken from a student essay assignment. And I'm going to kind of walk you through what I'm looking for and how I go about grading. So let's take a look at what it says. Go ahead and take a second. I'm going to give you a minute to read it over so I don't have to necessarily read it to you, and then we'll get started. Okay, if you need more time, just pause this video until you're ready to go on, but we're going to go ahead and take a look at this particular paragraph. So, poverty is a major component in the causes of malaria in African children. Malaria is a disease that can be prevented. It can be treated. So a couple things going on here. First of all, in the very first sentence or two, I expect to see a topic sentence. The problem is when I look at these two sentences here, I have two different ideas. I have the issue of poverty, and I also have the issue of a disease that can be prevented and treated, right? So poverty is a cause, but once you get the disease, the treatment is what happens afterwards. To me, right off the bat, this particular paragraph doesn't have a solid reason for being. The topic sentence isn't clear. So let's keep going. In his journal, The Billion-Dollar Malaria Moment, Mark Grabowski describes poverty as a challenge against the treatment of malaria. Okay, so there's a couple things happening here. First of all, we have a really good try at a signal phrase. There's a couple problems though. The billion-dollar malaria moment, it needs to be in quotation marks. And remember, every time you use something from a source, you have to make sure that all of the title words are capitalized. The other thing is it's not a journal, it's an article, because a journal would be the whole book that the article is contained in. So in his article, Mark Grabowski describes poverty as a challenge against the treatment of malaria. The rest is really excellent, right? The rest gives me a sense of the overall issue. There's a problem, though, in that he says poverty is a challenge against the treatment, but up here, poverty is a cause. Well, causing something and treating something, these seem like two different issues to me. And this could just be an issue of word choice, but the problem is when your reader is reading, you're not there to correct them and to give them information. So I'm not really sure what's going on here. Okay, since most African rural families can afford just enough food to sustain them, which is as a result of the high rate of poverty in the majority of the African rural population. This here is a sentence fragment. Since most African rural families can afford just enough food, it's missing the rest of that information, which is a result of the high poverty is missing part of the sentence. This needs to be revised into something like, as a result of the high poverty, most rural African families can afford just enough food. Now, the writer does something really great here. He has this parenthetical citation, and because there's no quotes, and because that period is outside of the parentheses, I know that all of this information comes from a paraphrase. He has paraphrased an idea from that page, 1052, of an article called The Billion-Dollar Malaria Moment. And that's great, because that gives me just enough information that I can go back to the works cited page and see what else is going on. For example, a typical rural African family will find it almost impossible to get access to mosquito nets for the prevention, there's a weird extra space there, of the disease due to the shortage of income. Okay, that is not common knowledge, so is that information, find it almost impossible? Is that coming from this article, or is that something else? Also, when someone gets, careful the subject-verb agreement, infected with malaria, treatment becomes a major problem since they cannot afford the treatment because of the state of poverty in which they live. Okay, not bad, but again, where is that information coming from? Is it all coming from Mark Grabowski's essay about the billion-dollar malaria moment, Or did he get this from another source? It's not clear because the signal phrases aren't clear. So when we think about paragraphs, remember, we always think about TED, topic sentence, evidence, and discussion. This particular writer has only two of those things. We have our topic sentence, which is at best shaky because you have both cause and treatment in the same paragraph, but the sentence isn't strong enough to hold those two together. It's a good start, but it needs some work. Then we have evidence. We have the evidence that they can only really barely afford food. We have the evidence that it's hard to find mosquito nets because of poverty. And we have the evidence that if they're infected with malaria, treatment's a problem because they can't afford it. That's great. That's 3 pieces of evidence to support the issue that poverty is a real problem when it comes to treating malaria in Africa. But where's the discussion? So what? So what is your reader supposed to take away from this paragraph? Remember, every paragraph needs to come full circle. So if you introduce the idea that poverty is a problem, at the end of the paragraph, you have to come back and give some kind of so what statement. So because poverty is a problem, what? Do they suffer more because of it? How does this paragraph relate to the overall thesis statement? So overall, it's not a bad paragraph. It's doing a lot of things right. It's using a signal phrase at the beginning. It has parenthetical citation for the page numbers. It's clearly giving us evidence, which is really important, and not just a single piece of evidence, but 3 specific points. But it's also missing a few things. It's missing a really strong topic sentence. I think a topic sentence could be crafted from these 2 sentences, but 1 sentence to declare your paragraph, not 2 or 3. And then finally, the thing that most students, when they're first starting to learn to write college essays, forget about is that discussion. Don't just leave your evidence hanging. Back it up, wrap up what you're saying, and tell your reader in no uncertain terms, why is this important? Why does this particular paragraph help you prove your overall thesis, your overall argument? So I hope that's helped you kind of get a sense of what I'm looking for in a paragraph. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.